The United States is amid yet another consequential election season featuring former President Donald Trump and Vice President Kamala Harris. Many Ethiopians and Eritreans live across the U.S., with those in swing states wielding significant influence. Now, in recent state elections in Georgia and Virginia, where numerous Ethiopian-Americans voted Republican to protest the Biden-Harris administration, who they feel remaining silent amid substantial evidence of genocide and ethnic cleansing in Ethiopia. Now, at this rally in Washington, D.C., Ethiopian Americans voiced their support for Republicans. For News Central, international correspondent Afua Hagan has more.
Historically, Ethiopian expatriates favoured the Democrats, viewing them as champions of inclusion and multiculturalism. Yet this trend is shifting as the party increasingly embraces progressive ideologies seen as opposing religious and family values. Given that most Ethiopians, both Christians and Muslims, are religious conservatives, these stances have become untenable, prompting May to explore other political options.
Donald Trump, we want change! We want change!
As an African, we really value our family, our kids, and how they're raised. And right now, with the school system and the way they're pushing the LGBTQ initiative down our throats, where we cannot even really, to be honest with you, opt out.
I'm voting Republican because the Democrats obviously have not honored the promise to the people. They have neglected the suffering of so many millions of people and not heard our voices over years and years of advocating and bringing forth the evidence of the U.S. government's corrupt policies and draconian policies against African nations.
As an Ethiopian-American, from the geopolitical perspective, I think that the current Biden-Harris administration has been very neglectful toward the genocide that's been happening in Ethiopia, for instance. It happened under their watch.
If I'm not elected to Congress, I will still make sure that
Republican Congress candidate Jerry Torres has promised the American Ethiopian community that he is the best choice for them.
The United States gave, just as one example, $728 million to the Ethiopian government. They used the money to build a palace for the president, and then they bought 56 drones and was killing the Amhara people. And that money was not designated for that purpose. It was for humanitarian purposes. The Democrats have just given money to countries, and the dictators are using it for whatever they want to use it for. I mean, imagine this, even Iran, right? We give Iran money, they send drones our way or to Israel or other countries. And believe me, nobody wants a war. I want all wars, all killing to end. And I think that's what we can bring to the African continent, is the end of the little attempts at genocide, whether it's Central Africa, East Africa, West Africa, and support the democratic governments under there, because they're surrounded sometimes by dictatorships, and we don't even listen to what they said.
Whoever they vote for, it's crucial that the diaspora make their voices heard in this election. In Washington, D.C., I'm Afua Hagan for News Central.
Now joining us is our international correspondent, Afua Hagan, who will be joining from Washington, D.C. We also have Chika Mordi, economist and chairman, United Capital PLC. Afua, let me ask you first, what's the atmosphere like on the ground in the key swing states, and how are the voters responding to the campaigns?
Well, we have less than 38 hours until the polls close tomorrow evening. And the atmosphere in the Sunbelt states and the Rust states is really about getting the job done for whichever candidate they usually go to. Now, today, you're going to have Trump and Harris crisscrossing the country as they were over the weekend in those swing states, in Pennsylvania, in Michigan, in North Carolina, in these places that are really key on the path to victory. It's really about getting the votes from the Electoral College there. So Harris is going to spend the first part of today campaigning in Pennsylvania. And like I said, Trump will be in North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and Michigan as well. Wisconsin is another swing state that's in the blue wall. And then you also have Georgia. Now, Georgia flipped to Democrats during the last election, and that was a really big thing for the Democrats and for the Republicans. And there was a lot of challenges made by the Republican Party with them saying that there was electoral fraud, which was disproved in the end. So it's all about trying to get these swing states nailed down in the Sun Belt and the Rust Belt, like I said. And those will take either candidate on the path to 270 in the Electoral College. And once you have 270, then you are declared the winner.
All right, thanks, Afua. Now, coming to Chika, how do you think that this upcoming election will impact the future of absentee and mail-in voting in the United States?
Well, thank you. First of all, thank you for having me. I feel that it's sort of like it's moved on from the past. So in 2020, post-COVID, Donald Trump and the Republican Party very much discouraged absentee voting and mail-in voting, and they used it as one of the reasons they gave for their view that the election was rigged. This time around, they actively campaigned to get their followers to go and vote, either early voting or by mail-in voting. So you can see already there's a significant uptick in terms of mail-in voting and early voting. So I feel that debate is in the past now. Going forward, I don't expect that there will be any real resistance to either. And there's a return to the normalcy where Republicans used to overwhelm Democrats in early voting and mail-in ballots.
Right. Now, Afua, how are you keeping up with the latest developments in the early voting process, especially? What trends are we seeing so far?
Well, you've had 75 million early votes cast so far. That's thought to be going to rise to 85 million by the end of today. And that's more than half of the votes cast already. Now, it won't be until perhaps next week we can really drill down on that number and see if it was a record for where we were in the 2020 election. But it is a huge number, 85 million early votes cast by the end of today. And in those early votes, we are seeing a particular trend, especially in Iowa, where we've had a poll and we've had some counting of early votes. And Iowa is a very, very red state. And there is some suggestion that perhaps Kamala Harris has done very, very well in that state. Now, this could say a lot to us about polls, if they're accurate, if they're inaccurate, or it could say a lot to us about early voting and who is early voting. It seems that Harris is doing well amongst women. This could be the election that has the most amount of division between men and women, who men and women are voting for. And we could see women really coming out in their numbers to vote for Kamala Harris. But in terms of early voting, like I said, huge numbers, 85 million by the end of the day. And it's not until next week, perhaps, we'll see the impact of that. Like I said, it's under 38 hours now until the polls close. We don't know when we would get a result. Last year, it took until the Saturday, which was sort of 5 days after the election, before we got results. But in 2020, we had loads more mail-in ballots because of the pandemic. We have less of that this year, much more early voting. But because the race is so tight, especially in some of those key battleground states, what you could see is recounting happen. And that may be what delays us getting a result.
Okay, so let me come to Chika. Let's talk about the voter turnout. Chika, what are some of the most critical factors that you think could affect voter turnout, especially on election day? And how will this absentee and mailing voting affect the overall outcome?
Okay, that's a good question. There are two parts to that question. Well, first of all, voter turnout is going to be very high this season. It's obvious. Last time was 66%, a bit above that, which in itself was significant. This year, it's on course to be higher than that, and that will wreak havoc on some of the models that pollsters have been using, because even a 5% increase or 3% increase in terms of turnout could significantly alter what the polling is pointing at least directionally. The factors typically, like this time around, because you're having a lot of early voting and mail-in voting, so there's some sort of front loading, and if people vote, they can vote twice. So everyone who's voted early or voted by mail is not going to show up on election day mostly, but there's some provisions where that could happen in some states, but that would not be statistically significant. So what that tells you is, this is a good point out. In the 2020 election, there were 45% of the votes were mail-in ballot. So far, that number has been exceeded in terms of percentages and in terms of absolute number of votes. So again, I think it's on course to do that. Now, the factors that affect turnout on election day, there are multiple factors. First of all, it's the GOTV, the get out the vote effort by each party, and how effective they are at doing that, how it brings people out. Secondly, obviously, weather and other events. There's inclement weather, like if it's raining heavily, for example, turnout is going to be low. Low propensity voters like to vote at their convenience, so they don't show up if there's bad weather. And then thirdly, it's the degree of organization, and sometimes it's chief as well, right, in terms of disinformation. But the organization, in terms of what sort of queues you're going to have, are they going to be very long queues? Would they have last-minute shifts in voting locations and things of that nature? But both sides are very motivated. Democrats slightly more than Republicans. So we expect to see heavy turnout on election day as well.
Okay, so very quickly, I want to get your final thoughts. I'll start with Afua. What are your final thoughts on the elections so far?
Well, it has been a very hard-fought campaign on both sides, and the tightest election in modern history, probably since 2000. And whoever wins, they will make history. Americans are either about to elect the first woman and the first woman of African-American descent and South Asian descent into the White House, or Americans are about to elect the first convicted felon into the White House. So this is historic on all counts, absolutely. And I think over the course of this week, we will see how democracy unfolds and plays its part in this election. What you do have is a Trump campaign already laying the groundwork to dispute the result if it doesn't go their way. And a lot of people are fearing that we could have a repeat of what happened in 2020 and into 2021, where you did have that insurrection on January 6th, 2021. So like I said, this is a hugely, hugely historic election for the United States and, the closest fought in modern history.
All right. Very quickly, Chika, can I get your final thoughts on the elections?
Afua, I agree with Afua. It's very historic for the reasons she said. Also, if Donald Trump wins, he will be the oldest ever elected president in American history. And he would also be the first president to be re-elected after leaving office, to be twice elected after losing. I think it's going to be, if Trump wins in the polls, even if it's a narrow win, there will be a sort of seamless transition. If he loses, it's going to be very challenging. It's almost definitely going to dispute the outcome of the elections. And we have to hold the breath all the way to January 6th to see the dynamic that plays out in terms of who controls the House and if the slates of electors will be rejected or accepted, or if it's going to come down to Congress now determining who the president is. So we should hang on to your seats. It's going to be a bumpy ride. But right. I feel that the polls are getting it wrong, and hopefully I won't have egg on my face if we speak again in a couple of weeks.
Okay. Thank you so much, New Central International Correspondent Afua Hagan, joining us from Washington, D.C. And of course, thanks to Chika Mordi, economist and chairman, United Capital PLC.